Yo, how are you doing, folks? Welcome to episode 45 of the Simpa Life Podcast. I am not joined this evening by Mr. Maka MC. I don't know where he is. Wish him well, whatever he's doing on this wonderful evening. I am, however, joined by this lovely mustache that I've decided to keep since Product Earth, so it'll be keeping me company in his absence. Tonight's guest is a children's book author. She's also quite an interesting lady from the conversations that we've just had leading up to the recording of this. Basically, she wrote the book Walter the Wizard and the Magic Seed. She is Allison Littlefair. Welcome, Alison. How are you doing?
Hello, thanks for having me.
Anytime. So yeah, like as I was saying, sort of before we started recording, there's not much information of you in the public sphere. There is only really sort of Walter and information about the book that you have created, which I must say is a wonderfully well illustrated kids book.
Yeah, you've got the small version. I've got the A4 now.
Oh, nice.
I've got an A4 size now.
Oh, I got a limited edition.
You got the first edition, yeah.
Yeah, and again, I was really blown away by the simplisticness of it, but the fact that you simplified the narrative of it. I speak with professors, doctors, politicians, people from all walks of life about this, and they just can't get it. Yet you've managed to put into less than 30 pages a narrative that a child can understand of the power of this plant.
Yeah. It's just creating an alternative narrative that isn't there, that for me needed to be there. You know, it's given an injustice to the plant, really. What we've been doing for the past sort of, generation after generation of just being sort of lied to, and I think there was a real need now for us to sort of re-educate the next generation, because it's going to be to their detriment, especially with the environmental factors. Obviously I've done a lot of stuff networking with the mums with the kids with seizures that are going from like 300 tonic seizures a day, and like the doctors would rather remove a part of the brain before offering them plant medicine. And my mind just blew apart with all of that. And I thought, well, we need a huge, massive light shedding on it. And I'm obviously going to be the one to do it. And I did create Walter the Wizard. He sort of came about 9 years ago, and because I lived near the woods, and we used to go down there with my kids, and I used to always like make up these stories and about a wizard that had like these magic red shrinking shoes, and he'd shrink down to tiny town and go in search for clues, and he'd just go and investigate different problems, and then it came to me one day, which I'll get into in a bit, about obviously my experience with cannabis, and the two sort of came together harmoniously, and I just thought I need to do this. But yeah, so he's just come out of nowhere, really. And when you say you've never heard of it, we have had an iPhone game out years ago with him, I did, but it was just about dangers in the home and things like that, and mums leaving tablets about and stuff like that. It was a crazy little game we had years ago. But then it sort of got left, and then I got very unwell and never touched base with it, never picked it back up again. And then I went on my own sort of journey, and then brought him back out, but with the cannabis side of it, and put him with that this time.
Interesting.
So yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, because I was wondering, because it does seem to be quite an established character. That was what I always found a bit striking about it. I mean, you obviously sent me, like we were saying, the first edition print. Must have been, it was before lockdown, so it must be nearly 2 years.
2 years ago.
Yeah. And again, I was struck by its established nature, if you know what I mean. That it very much you didn't feel like you'd thrown this together. It felt like it was crafted with an articulate point, a message within it that you're trying to destigmatize and remove away the horrible fear of the image of this leaf of the plant, I think. And that is a powerful thing, because kids are still growing up in this country with the image that, like one reefer will send them mad kind of thing. Yeah.
I think I learned firsthand through my own experience. I don't know if you want me to start going into that now.
Yeah,
basically, I suffered with pain all my life. I did gymnastics for like 12, 13 years. And when I left gym, I broke my ankle in 3 places, and I ended up with hypermobility, because you're like over double jointed. And so I ended up suffering with pain probably from the age of about 20. And then that sort of spiraled my mental health. I spent, I'd say, a good 15 years on antidepressants. And then my pain got worse and worse. I ended up with fibromyalgia, kept going to the doctor. They were putting me on more pain meds. And to the point where they had me on oxycodone, OxyContin, tramadol, pregabalin. I was even on codeine intermittently with all of that concoction. Then you're on obviously laxatives because you can't go on the toilet when you're all of these prescription drugs. It was an absolute nightmare. I was forced on overweight. I couldn't function, and I've got 2 kids, so it was hell for me. And then I sort of stumbled literally randomly about an article about CBD. This is probably about four years ago now. And I just remember thinking, oh, this is interesting, and just really searching for an alternative way without all of this. But you go to your GP and they're advising you to do this, and you think, well, that must be the right thing to do, And I had a lot of faith in that sort of system years ago. I don't so much now, but I did. And basically, I cold turkey, which I don't advise anybody to do because, it's so dangerous. But I did cold turkey off everything because I just got it into my head that I didn't want to be on any of this anymore. It wasn't working for us as a family. My partner's in the fire brigade. It was just wasn't working for us. And so I started my cannabis journey and I got the CBD, like a high extract paste, started on that. And then I used to have like the cannabis tea. And then I ended up getting the RSO oil and the high THC oil. There's people don't call it that. But yeah, so I ended up on that and it just totally changed my life. And I came off everything and I lost 4 stone and there was a light at the end of the tunnel. It was just like, wow. And I think because I've wrote 9 stories already for Walters. This is just one of them. There's a lot. There's a whole world to Walter. But so for me, it just really made sense to just honour the plant and pay some sort. I wanted to give back to what it'd give me my life back, and then I started looking into and connecting with all the mums and stuff that were fighting in outside Parliament and trying to get the access to the oil for the kids, and it just broke my heart. I just couldn't sit and do nothing. Yeah. I just thought, what can I do? And obviously it just made absolute sense to me. It was a bit of an epiphany moment just to, right, well, you've got Walter, let's just, he can investigate this plant and let him sort of create a new learning for they have more of a balanced judgment of it instead of it's just a dangerous thing that could end up saving their life one day. So for me, it just didn't make sense to go about it in that way. And obviously I experienced the shame because I'm a parent. I've got a business. I have my own pet castings business, doing solid silver things and copper. And it was awful going to school. Obviously I homeschool my daughter now, but before when it was just horrendous, that shame. And what I've learned since doing this book, like the feedback I've had in 2 years, Simpa, has just been crazy because I did it obviously to shine a light on the kids with seizures, their story specifically. But what I've then learned is that basically it's helping people that are just generally having to medicate with it, and it's getting rid of the shame in the house and for them, the parents, that the kids are like thinking they're doing something, and it just calms the situation, and it just sort of literally, like you said, it's very simply wrote, but it does the job. It just sort of, you're just talking about a plant and that's it really. And I think it's going to be a bit extended soon. I'm going to do it and I want a real limited edition copy of it because I just love it. But I think there's so many more environmental factors we can add to it and flashcards and all sorts of things for them, so that's kind of where I'm at with this. Yeah,
it very much feels like you've got an introduction to the world. Walter is in the cannabis world. And then as you explore, again, something that I doff my proverbial cap to you for is that you've then put a couple of the sort of the industrial uses of it. You've primarily focused on sort of the therapeutic aspect of it within the book. But then again, with speaking of plastics and of clothing, of building materials, again, paper is one of the main things that is my pet peeve in this world, is the dioxins, which is the second most polluting chemical in the world that no one's heard of, that exists purely because of white paper. Exactly, I think you could almost do a series where he explores those. So you could actually then go and almost partner with environmental groups or organizations and be able to show actual data within them. So then sort of Walter could be sort of, I don't know, disgusted by a rubbish heap or whatever, and then learn about recycling and what then cannabis could do to replace those systems. And because again, it's wonderful because it's an early intervention. This is before most of before the kids have been programmed by the stigma and the fear and the persecution of their parents or the authoritative figures in their lives. And I think if you can, plant that seed, as it were, it protects them against that barrage of propaganda until when they're old enough, they can make that informed decision about kind of what they want to do. And I think
you're not glorifying it. You're not glorifying it. You're giving an informed, balanced sort of, you know, like, I don't know. I just think it's given an it's not accurate. You know, you get taught to debate things. That's what I like to do with the kids. I like to have a good debate about all of it, and to just give one false narrative, for me, it is just an injustice. So it's like, you know, we have to do the right thing, us the people. Otherwise, if you're relying on someone else to do it, it's just not going to get done. And I don't know. I just think we need to do it a different way now, moving forward, you know.
I suppose in some ways, actually, it's a breakdown of then the parental relationship. That actually, if you don't do this, and then your child then goes away and learns the propaganda or whatever, and you kind of, as a parent, go, well, I don't believe that, but I'm not going to challenge it. Later on in life, when they inevitably learn the truth, which each generation does faster, given the power of technology and the movement of information, they're just not going to have that respect for you. When they become a teenager, they're going to go, you don't know what you're talking about, old man. They're not going to have that, that respect, you know?
Yeah. Exactly that. It's people find it really hard to sort of start the conversation with the kids, you know, and I think with the book, it's just sort of, it is that like get out clause for them. They can just say, oh, let's have a look at this and let's read about this. But you know what I mean? You only really need to read it once or twice and you've done it. That's it. You've removed that horrible, harsh stigma away from it. And then it's done, job done, really. There's nothing else you don't need to go on and on and on about it, you know. But I think there's so many people now that have got much better quality of life down to cannabis, but they're still hiding it from the family, and they've still got all this shame attached to it. And I just think you've got to own it. You know, it's been a hard journey for me, and especially like nobody's like me around here, but like I've just had to own it and get on with it. And I actually I like saying it now, because I just think like, you know, it shocks people. They're like, what the hell? And I just think, well, I just say it. I don't seek the approval of anyone now. And that's a journey in itself that people go on, I suppose. But like you think, oh, what's people going to think? What they're going to, but I just felt like it really needed to be done, you know, and it sort of created itself. Like I said to you, I haven't like really thought, oh, what can I do? It just came together. And I've got an amazing friend in India, Manas, and he did these illustrations because he's worked with me for about 5 or 6 years. He's having a right hard time over there at the minute, but he's fantastic, and we just did it. He said, yeah, that's great, but with where he is, he couldn't put his name to it, you know, because it's just very, very dodgy over there. So it was like, he said, I don't want any part of that, you know, which is fair enough, and I've just moved forward with it. But it's just, I don't know, I just think it's just a plant, isn't it? It's just a book, it's just a story, just, you know, it's just about removing that stigma that's just unjustly there.
Yeah, no, very true, very true. I suppose with the in an ideal world, the ultimate would be the book itself would be printed on cannabis paper as well.
Yeah, that would be good.
I can genuinely see this, or at least the mechanism of it, and again, the character of Walter being an educational tool. I genuinely see it. What was that thing as a kid that always tripped me out? Magic School Bus, and there was that wacky red-haired teacher, and she'd shrink the bus down. They do all this kind of insane stuff, and as a kid, there are still concepts of physics or certain quite elementary principles of science that I remember, not because of the other things that I've learned or studied in my life, but because of the imagery of cartoons that were attached to that as a young child. So I think that, again, would you consider, or have you looked at the idea of making something animated, like a cartoon series, like even like a YouTube sort of series?
Well, I've had a cartoon done of him before. That's where, I don't know if you've seen the intro and the outro of him, where he shrinks and he goes back. So I've got that, obviously, but it's so old, you know, like the graphics on it looks terrible now, because everything just is so advanced now. But obviously, I think this was probably about 7 or 8 years ago, and it was with like 2 tunes. We'd done like a cartoon with it, but obviously nothing to do with the cannabis side of it. But yeah, I mean, anything like that, eventually moving forward, I can see him doing all sorts, because I've obviously got another book, 2 more books on the go with him, whereas the next one is about all different healing plants, you know, because it's more about like getting kids to understand plants as well, and knowing that it's not everything is pharmaceutical. You know, there's probably a plant to heal quite a lot of ailments on the planet already here, and it's about them sort of investigating it. So I've done that one, which I'm on with, and also I've finished the next one after this is about kids' unhelpful thoughts and everything. With all this, what's gone on now, it's just about them sort of really learning to talk about their emotions and their unhelpful thoughts, and that's totally natural, all that sort of thing. So he is a real like little investigator wizard guy. Like he's into all sorts, you know.
Nice, excellent. Yeah. So what's sort of been feedback from other parents? Like not people that have a reason to be informed on this. So not say parents of sick children. I imagine obviously within your local area, that some people obviously be aware of the book and of kind of how you advocate as you do. Do you find backlash for them? Do you feel that they still have a certain stigma towards it? Or do you think because they're seeing you living your life and you're not this criminal or bad person in their head, they're kind of going, okay.
I think I've opened a lot of people's eyes up. I think initially they're shocked. A lot of people that are sort of programmed, I think they are shocked that, you know, they just can't believe that they've seen a book like that, you know. And then other people have said, you know, it's a book from the future. It really shouldn't be out yet. But then I've also had a lot of people saying, I think it's just a great thing. And these are people that don't consume cannabis, but they just said, you know, the plant does do a lot of good for people. So you do need that counter narrative, you know, available for kids to understand, especially the CBD, you know, and all of that sort of aspect to it. And just instead of all the kids, when they're older, they go on antidepressants and stuff. There is a whole other narrative here about the plant and different, you know, cannabinoids and all the rest of it, which you know way more than me. And it you know, and I just say it all needs talking about to the kids. The kids are our future. That's what I say to everyone. You know, they're our future leaders. They're the ones that are going to be running the show eventually, and it's up to us to sort of give them an informed, you know, opinion on it all. Really,
there was. Sorry, something just flashed in my head. There was a theme park I was at as a kid. I think it was based on a movie, and they shrink down a spaceship and go into a human body. And my brain was just thinking there of, again, I don't know. I'm quite a creative person. I like to think in my own ways. I was thinking of Walter in the future, or like in a future spacey scientific setting, going into the human body and exploring the endocannabinoid system. Because most adults don't know they have an endocannabinoid system. Whereas again, early intervention, teaching them that they have this regulatory system in their body that can be responsible for all of these wide variety of things. I think even giving them the curiosity or the concept of that, I think would be beneficial, even if they can't quite grasp the nuance of the science to it. I think if you could find a simplistic way of creating that narrative, I think it would be important to solidify that into the minds of young people quite early on, so that then they can almost protect themselves against this propaganda if they still unfortunately have to in the future grow up in a world of cannabis propaganda.
I know. Do you think they're going to have to?
I mean, I hope not. I mean, my sister's got 4 kids. I've got 3 nephews and a niece, and luckily I never one kid. She's taking care of the quarter. My mum's happy. We're all good. But they're varied ages, 14 down to like 2. And I do genuinely worry about their interactions with the world. They've been told for the past several years, they know who I am, they know what I do. In fact, my nephews follow me on social media. It wouldn't surprise me if you actually end up seeing this at some point. But they know that I've got their back. They can ask me anything. They can send me a WhatsApp at any time. But even having someone as knowledgeable, having lived experience with a lot of drugs and drug culture like I have, and the ups and downs of the law, it still worries me that they wouldn't maybe have the confidence or the time to reach out to avoid a difficult situation. Whereas I think that the more we can get kids material that is not about, as you say, glorification. It is not about demonization on the other side of it. It is somewhere about acceptance of going in the world. There are people that can do. and yeah, changing that narrative within their minds, not creating or molding these very impressionable little brains to be hateful and resentful of people that can end up in difficult circumstances, you know, rather than just, you know, having this blanket thing of everyone that does drugs is a druggie, therefore they're bad. You can provide a nuanced conversation there.
Exactly that. Yeah. And it's, you know, like I always say to my kids, you know, you've got to think outside the box. And I get them to critically think about everything. And so what do you think about that? And why is that necessarily, you know, true? Because who said that and back that, you know, and it's just, you've got to get them thinking. Like, I just think, so they're just going to listen to one narrative, believe that it's false. It's false. I mean, I think for me, like if it wasn't false, then, you know, I wouldn't be this sort of het up about it. But because for me, it's like, it's just not, it's injustice. It's just not. And especially like, you know, when I've done lots of chats with things like Karen Gray and Joanne Griffiths and people like that, and seeing the struggle that they've gone through. And I've tried to speak to people around here locally, and I've said, you know, what the kids are dealing with, and they don't want to know. And I think it's because it doesn't directly affect them. So they'd rather turn a blind eye to it. Oh, I'm not getting involved in that. You know, it's nothing to do with me. And this ignorance thing and head in the sand sort of situation I see everywhere. And I just think, well, and it's a scary thing to do something like that on your own when you've not got the support around you. That's why I reached out. I've been reaching out to sort of you and people like that for a long time, because I have done this on my own. It's been a scary little journey, but I've grown and I've had to do it on my own, and I understand that, and I've had to sort of navigate my way around it all. But it hasn't been easy, you know, because people do have such an opinion on it, you know, and it's but it won't stop me from doing it, because I would say I've had 100% more positive feedback than I've had any negative, you know, so which is really reassuring. But yeah, people are overall just absolutely love it. You know, they've just said like it's fantastic. They've never seen anything like it. And it, like you said, it's nothing spectacular, but it is what it says on the tin. You know, it just sort of does that.
It's like I said, it's because it's colourful, it's engaging, it's cute. But like I said, the simplistic narrative of it and the way that you use Walter to state that there's kind of a confusion. And it, again, is you're highlighting the space, the dichotomy between this being a good thing or a bad thing, and just going, well, where's the kind of the truth to it? And I think that, again, curiosity is I think, the main thing that we lose, you know?
I was just going to say, it says in the book, I can't think what one part where it says the village look on to see if Titch would come to any harm. And it's like, it's really sort of in a fairy tale, but it's about current day. It's about present. It's what's happening, really. People are like, oh, what's, you know, it's being done in a way like that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's what you alluded to before about the people kind of, I wouldn't say it's so much that they don't care as the kind of cognitive dissonance and bias in their brain that kind of says that, what you're telling me is all good and whatever, but it would only detrimentally harm my current life, to then think that, oh my God, I've judged these people for whatever, or, you know, but then it's about the thing that I've got really good at, that I think is why I am invited to speak and to produce the content that I do, is to find the nuanced argument that is relevant to each person. Everyone has something they care about. And the beauty of cannabis is it's so multi-versatile that it touches everything through its industry, its therapeutic potential, or through consequential actions of changing the status quo would literally benefit, well, everybody except a very few elite at the top, but they're very much working their ways to get their fingers into these pies. And I think that, just giving that kid the defense, so that instead of growing into the adult that goes, oh, it's bad, why is it bad? And they can't answer you. All they're going back to is the first time an adult said, there is this thing in this world called cannabis. It is bad. It will harm you. Don't ever go near it. And then what they've done is every time they've seen it, they've associated the people that are consuming it as being bad. They do this. They hang out in these spaces. They listen to this music. Therefore, they're bad things. So I'll ignore them. And it ends up creating and ostracizing whole communities of people, because they were programmed to reject the idea of this plant, let alone interacting with it.
The worrying thing is that they welcome the idea of tablets and wine and everything else, and that to me is just not helpful at all.
That comes from the parent. That comes from the parent, though, doesn't it? When the parents are like, they're drinking the wine, it was like, oh, that's Mummy's special juice. Do you know what I mean? You create this kind of intrigue, and what is this curiosity? And then with the pills as well, is your mum's, she gets weak and hurt, and then all of a sudden she goes to the doctor and she's back again. He gave her magic. Yeah. But that's the logic of a child. We've got to remember, and that's what I think you've tapped into
it's
here.
Conditioning, yeah.
You've used that same mechanism, as it were, to show the potential in just this cannabis. Side. As you said with the plant medicines in your future project, I think that's brilliant. Again, it shows that the vast majority of modern pharmaceutical drugs, the majority of the modern pharmacopoeia, comes from the natural world.
Plants.
Yeah, it comes from ancient knowledge, shamanic practice. So it further highlights that connection to our ancestry and our history.
Yeah, I speak to people obviously about that it's cured cancer in quite a lot of cases. And they're like, oh, no, it hasn't, but then I say to people, the periwinkle plant is chemotherapy. That's where chemotherapy comes from, the periwinkle plant. I was talking about all sorts with the kids about like paracetamol, a lot of certain ones in tree barks and things like that. We're looking into all sorts of stuff and making poultices. And like, I love all of that sort of thing, and I think it's been forgotten. And really, we need to all be sort of, again, reinvigorate it and talk to the kids about it all and stuff like that.
It's difficult because a lot of them, again, the modern pharmaceutical industry, they have patented products that are extracted from natural resources still. Even though a lot of them have moved towards majority synthetics, there's still quite a large market of naturally derived pharmaceutical compounds. And because there is then the profit margin within that, there is the need to, I suppose, deny people the common knowledge of the weeds and herbs that grow around us. There have these amazing therapeutic properties. Yeah, but again, why would they want to educate us to grow our own healing, potentially beneficial sort of herbs and plants when it's the marketing as well, though. I've spoken this before quite a few times on the podcast, that we've been conditioned in this country. If you go to a doctor and you don't get a pill, your brain walks away and you go, he didn't listen. They're not helping. And it is that weird mechanism. And again, we've all got that from somewhere. And it's quite hard to then consciously go, why am I saying this? Why am I thinking this? And I think that you can understand why a lot of people that have never had any interaction with cannabis or worse, only had second or third hand stories of bad or negative interactions with it, will build up this resilience and resistance to it in such a way that they'll become almost like an evangelical about it. They'll shout about these ills and dangers of this plant that they've never learned anything about. Yeah.
And have such passion and configuration doing it. It's mad, isn't it? And it's sad. It's sad. It's sad to me because I just think there's much better ways of doing things, that don't have all the side effects. And I don't know. I just think there's a real need for all of this sort of thing now, especially with our kids. Because I think that's I'm here for the kids. That is my thing, and I will always be a voice for them as long as I can talk, So that's just where I'm at with it all. And obviously, like all this jumping into a different thing, but obviously this lockdown and stuff, the way it's affected their mental health. And again, that seems to be overlooked as well at the minute. So I'll be shining a big light on that as well soon. It's just what I have to do. But we'll get there, I suppose. But it's great when I connect with people like you and stuff like that. So it just solidifies everything that we all know who everyone is, and it's just nice. And I've met so many lovely people. I mean, I think you've met Mike Wise, don't you? You've done like talks and stuff with Mike. Well, Mike's been really, really. He's ended up being a good friend. You know what I mean? Like over the last 2 years, we speak quite a lot, and he's just been fantastic. And there's been so many lovely people I've met over the last 2 years. It's been a real journey, but. And it's an ongoing one, obviously, but it's good. It's good.
It sounds it. I want to jump back to a point that you brought up sort of before, and it's something that I kind of encapsulated in the summation of my talk last weekend at Product Earth. So not my presentation, sorry, the fireside talk. And I basically said, I can't think of the exact wording that I used. The video will be coming out at some point, so I will be able to share it. But basically, what is the point of saving these kids if they haven't got a planet to live on? The harder the medical cannabis industrial complex goes after this is special medicine rather than this is a plant that has medical benefits, we are losing the conversation, because then they're not promoting the industrial benefits of it. Then they're trying to heal these children with products that are grown in Israel, flown into the UK, creating huge carbon footprints. You know what I mean? The packaging of it is then still BPA and BPZ rich plastics that then has a product that is a natural solvent because of the terpenes in it, which will then leach the chemicals into the product. There's little consideration for the overview of all of this. And so that I think that hopefully what you are doing with this, that the children that will be exposed to this, is they will learn to be curious of the wider benefits that, yes, it can be a medicine that heals, but it is also a plant that sequesters carbon, that gives us an opportunity to save the environment,
completely healthy environment.
Those other applications. And I think that's the wider conversation that I always try to come back to on these podcasts, is that if we overemphasize one aspect or one industry within this multifaceted potential industry, then we fall into oversight of certain other potential benefits. So I've seen this at farms that are then mulching the biomass. You know what I mean? That could be made into plastics, into textiles, into graphene, into whatever. Yeah. You've then got this with the seed producers that are then only producing for seed, and then again wasting the fibrous materials. Yeah. There's not this push or drive really for the full use of the plant, because again, few people seem to be able to grasp that it is one plant with tens of thousands.
It's like a miracle plant. It's not normal, is it? It does that many things. When you say things to people, they're like, "Oh, come on, what? It does everything." I'm like, well, it pretty much does. But it does sound like you're being too far-fetched, but it is as good as that, isn't it?
It really does. I mean, I'm working with somebody at the minute who I shan't name, and they're working on a book, and they're quite sort of high profile, and speaking to them and discussing just some of the things that to me I take for granted because I've known them for many years, and I stumble across them constantly within my work and what I choose to research and the knowledge I seek to accrue. Yeah. But then watching them light up and be like, oh my God, and just watching the pennies drop like bags of them is always a wonderful thing. And it just shows that we can never stop talking about this. There's never enough content being produced. There's never enough books being written. There's never enough demographics and audience being hit with this. And you are one of the first people I've seen that has tried to do this in such a way. Like, the one thing I appreciate more than anything in this is you call it cannabis the whole way through. Uh-huh. You didn't deviate and go, well, this is medical cannabis or this is hemp. You literally just went for the whole thing. And I think that deserves kudos and respect. Because
and do you know why I did that?
No, why?
From listening to you, Callie, and Mike Wise on one thing about 3 years ago, whatever, listening to that. And I remember you saying about, you need to call it by the name that it is and not be fluffing it about calling it hemp and this, that, and the other, and this, and I just took it on board, I suppose. And I just thought, start as you mean to go on with it. You've all had a really big impact on the book, really, to be honest. That's, that's where my knowledge has come from with it really. And obviously my own journey of going through that experience with it myself, but basically a lot of it has come from sort of watching you guys. Really, it's been one of them sort of experiences.
How wonderful that it's come full circle like this, and to be able to have you sat here discussing that.
I know, it's mad.
Wow. So, would you mind sort of you've alluded to it a little bit over the past sort of 40 minutes. But would you mind telling us a bit about your sort of journey with cannabis? Obviously, you spoke that you kind of went sort of cold turkey, and you worked sort of through sort of CBD and whatever else. How have you found it sort of since? And have you gone down the paradigm of sort of prescription, or are you sort of just quite happy to acquire as you go?
I won't. You mean like the can card thing? I have the oil. I have the high THC oil on a night, and I have a lady that makes me cannabis tea. So I have that. And I've got a really bad chest. I have a partial collapsed lung as well. So, but I do, the THC oil really sort of was the game changer for me, because I was on that many tablets, and I just couldn't sleep. I became an insomniac and everything like that. And it just totally regulated my whole body and everything. It just changed my whole life. And people say, it did. And I don't know, I will never touch another prescription drug. That's just where I'm at with it. Obviously, if I have to, and, you don't know what's around the corner. But I mean, as far as just painkillers and things like that, what I did work out was the more that the doctor put me on, the more pain I was in. And actually, when and also it's more of a psychological thing with the painkillers rather than actually helping with pain. They sort of make you feel like you can maybe cope with the pain better. It's more, for me, it was more of a psychological thing, and then you couldn't function without them. It was like, oh, and you get very protective over your prescription tablets. Oh, the doctor's given me them. I need them. You know, it's like a thing. And then you've got all of these. It was just such a, when I look back at that person I was, it's a scary thing, really. And I see it around me all the time with lots of friends. I see it everywhere. But, you know, people have to go on their own journey with this one. It's a whole lifestyle change. I say this to everybody. You know, I had to change my diet, meditation, yoga. It all comes into balance. Everything comes in at once, the spiritual aspect of things. And I don't know, like, I think it's a whole lifestyle change. And sort of cannabis really did that for me, you know. It really sort of changed the way I see everything, I suppose. It just, it did that to me. So I owe a debt to the plant, you know, that's how I see it. And this is my little bit, really. That's all I can do.
Yeah.
I've done something.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up an interesting point there of, this holistic approach, as it were, that so many people I know, and it starts weird. I mean, I've got friends, I'm not going to sort of embarrass, but that sort of then through no direct intervention of myself, sort of give up tobacco, sort of have then sort of gone vegan, started doing yoga and whatever else. And they do it almost as an intrinsic curiosity arises in them. And I think there was something in the nature of cannabis when you consume it, especially when you consume it around people who are not just trying to almost have a pissing contest. How much can I consume over you? But are consciously consuming, are choosing to consume it. I'm not about like shamanic practice or ritualistic practice. I'm still about people getting high together. But I mean that are not abusive to it, not being abusive of the plant. You know what I mean? In that it speaks to you, and it tells you to, you know, drink more water, reminds you to brush your teeth. You know what I mean? It goes, you should probably go to bed. You know, there is something in it. And again, to a lot of people, that's going to sound very hippie and spiritualist, but that's what I found in cannabis is that it provides in me a continuity. It reminds me to be conscious, to be as sentient
work on yourself.
Possible.
Yeah,
and I think that especially having grown a lot of cannabis over my lifetime, watching it grow as well, seeing it, tending to it, loving it, and caring for it. It taught me anyway to be much softer, to be much more respectful of nature and of the world, and to understand change, to see how something so small could become something so big, to then something so powerful and beneficial to me. You know what I mean? By my own hand. I think that's obviously, I guess, in some small way what people feel parenting. But humbling experience. And again, I think it's vital that people have at least one opportunity to grow this plant.
I think people have forgotten that side of life a lot, and especially a lot when they go on like all the I know people do need these things a lot of the time. I'm not sort of saying that, but there is like a path that I've seen people go down where they get on a lot of these pharmaceutical drugs, and they're having a lot of drink on a night and things like that, and they don't have a good outlook, and they can't eat healthy. It seems to make it makes another bad decision lead to another bad decision. Whereas I think once you realize that you've got to really do the work on yourself and try and become the best version of yourself, especially if you're a parent, it's your duty to try and make yourself the best person you can be for your kids. For me, that's how I see it. And obviously I would do anything that it takes to make myself the most calmest, nice. Like I just want to do that. And then you go into this whole nature side and the spiritual aspect of things, and just not in religious things, but I just mean just an understanding of like things are bigger than yourself, and like, you know, and I don't know. Yeah, I think cannabis sort of definitely gets you to understand things like that, you know, more than you would be on a prescription drug, say.
Well, we have known for a while from sort of various studies, a lot of them out of North America, they describe cannabis as an introspective agent, and that it causes what we call metacognition. So it gives you overview thinking. So this is why you end up seeing somebody on a couch with couch lock, kind of looking overly blazed, and they look like there's nothing happening, but in their head, they're thinking of every awkward interaction, every time they mispronounced a word, every wrong thing their brain, there's something that's going right, learn from this, be better, grow better. it's a teaching experience. And I think that if you allow it and if you sort of get out of your own way, consuming cannabis will give you an opportunity to find areas of your life that you've been lacking. So I find it so much with friends that have then, you know, been big drinkers or whatever, that then this was start smoking weed and start hiking, start camping, going wild swimming and stuff, going and really experiencing life on a budget and truly humbling themselves to what it is to be human.
Being grateful.
Sleep under the stars, wake with the morning sun, you know, to feel what it is to be human. And I think we've lost that in the greatest sense. We live in these concrete cages and stare into these black screens all day. And we have this faux pseudo connection to each other. And cannabis, and especially things like psilocybin mushrooms and entheogenic compounds, they strip away the matrix of reality that we've created for ourselves and show us the world that we live in, that our bodies live in and are responding to every day. Our anxieties, our depression, our cognitive detachment from our day-to-day lives is a consequence of us not wanting to live in this environment. You know, who's it? Jim Carrey said that depression is basically your body growing tired of the avatar you are playing. Yeah, I think that's a very profound, very profound thing, because most of us don't realize we're pretending to be something. Yeah. We truly don't, until we have a breakdown, until we have a journey, until we have some hardship, some sorrow, some loss, or even actually in some circumstances, a great victory in life. We don't have that metacognitive experience of going, oh shit. And it kind of collides. And most people, you'll get it a couple of times a year and you'll feel like you can look down and through your life. You feel for a moment, you can see kind of where you've been and where you're going. And to me, I almost describe it as the visual of like Donnie Darko, of the dreams that come out of them. And I feel it when I'm doing something I'm meant to be doing. And there's a moment of like the Japanese Zen, they call it satori. And it's a brief or momentarily enlightenment. And it is just a kind of and then as soon as you try to grasp it, it's gone again.
It's gone again. But all of a sudden it makes sense, perfect sense. And then it goes again.
And once you recognize that feeling, you move towards it wherever it is. And I think that's how people find themselves writing books, or they find themselves running podcasts or doing whatever is.
The creativity aspect of it, really comes to fruition, doesn't it? I think,
Yeah, I think cannabis is in some sort of consumption, the non-overconsumption of it, or the conscious consumption of it, I think is probably the best way to term it. Is like almost taking the glasses off in that 80s movie, They Live. The 80s movie, They Live, and he takes the glasses off and he can read the billboards and it's saying like obey, reproduce, that kind of thing, consume. And then we put them back on. It's just these billboards and this thing. And, and I think cannabis does the same sort of thing. Is it strips it back. And one of the quotes that I use quite often recently to describe this is, I think, encapsulates is Bill Hicks, the American comedian who died tragically too young. And he said that cannabis doesn't make you lazy. It just makes you realize that a lot of the shit you do isn't worth doing. And I think that's the biggest threat that cannabis is to the system, is people going, whoa, why am I working 70 hours a week?
Relax.
To buy this house in this part of the country, when actually if I move up there, I can work 20 hours a week, raise my kids, have a mortgage, have some land. And I think that's what it lifts for a few more.
Where I'm at now with we're trying to get off grid now and get some land, because it's just too chaotic, I think, at the minute. And it seems to have ramped up at some sort of pace like no other. I mean, you've seen a gradual sort of progression of things coming in and like the cash going and different things happening. But this last sort of 2 years, it's like they put the foot on the accelerator and it's like everything's changed. I'm like, it's moving too quick for me. And I want to go backwards. I want to go back to nature and go back to, just basics. And I say to the kids all the time, you've got that much stuff, like you've got far too much stuff. It's like, you don't even know what to do with it. You've got that much stuff, and it's sort of
paralyzing.
You just consume, and it's about, like you say, getting back out there and finding purpose and things in, that are already available. And, it's a whole different lifestyle change. Like you say, it's like two different minds, isn't it? That we've got going on at the minute. It's weird. You can see the manifestation with like van life and with permaculture and veganism and the rise of psychedelic sort of awareness, and all of these other things seem to be
coalescing around this idea that, yeah, people are rejecting the acceleration of globalization. They are rejecting the acceleration of kind of living in a that's your notes jumping off my wall.
It's like a dystopia, isn't it?
But it's weird because I grew up anyway with the paradox between sort of the Huxleyan argument and the Orwellian argument. Would we live in a world of fascism by force or fascism by choice? And until about 10 years ago, I was 1984. I was like, yeah, this is where this is going. They are going to force us into this shit, and it is going to be terrifying. Everything's going to be grey and drab, and there's going to be cameras spying on us, and everything's going to feel like peak Soviet era paranoia. That was what my brain was thinking. But then over the past 10 years, with what I've seen with the co-option of drug culture, with the co-option of these compounds and these substances. So it went from being LSD and to turn on, tune in, drop out in Timothy Leary's age of people just rebelling against the system to then Silicon Valley going, let's microdose LSD because it increases productivity. Do you know what I mean? And so then once you've seen what they've done with the patents and the weaponization, we have very much ended up in a Brave New World paradigm of people are so confused, hateful, resentful, and bitter, and just fucking by the world that they will choose a pharmacological intervention to keep themselves away from this. And we kind of already had that for a long time in alcohol. And this country have been very good at it, of keeping themselves nice and docile with those 2 or 3 that leads to 4 or 5 after work every evening. You know what I mean? But what we're now sort of seeing, and what I'm terrified of, is these novel synthetic compounds to mimic psilocin, which is the substance we derive from psilocybin when we consume magic mushrooms. The consequences of these potential compounds, that then if it's literally, you've got the doctor and you have a magic mushroom intervention in a clinical setting a few times a year, all you're doing is dealing with the consequence of the trauma every time you're being re-traumatized, rather than going, what the hell is going on? Whereas you take a bag full of mushrooms in the woods, you will quickly realize if you hate your job or you can't stand your partner, or you don't like where you're living. You know what I mean? That realization will hit you like a log. And I think that's the thing that they're trying to co-opt away from us, which makes that Brave New World far more scary, because we'll literally go, I'll take that little bit of access and go and have your thing if it means I'm safe and legal. We have weaponized morality and legality into the same thing. So efficiently that most people can't see beyond it. They're literally, look at the situation now, the number of people that contact me that want access to quality products, but can't or don't qualify or can't afford the prescription system, but don't want to break the law. They want illegal, legal medical cannabis. And when I try and explain the nuance and discuss these things with them, they're still just like, but then what do I do? And I'm like, well, you either have to break the law or you don't do anything. And for some people, again, it's for me.
It's frightening for people. It's frightening for, this is with the kids with seizures. I've spoke to the parents and they're in the situation where if they do that, they'll involve social services and they could have the kids took off them. It's like, it's not just about, because I've had growers messaging me since I'm just saying, we'll do the oil for the kids. We'll do it for, for next to nothing. They won't have to pay that much. All this. So I've gone back to them and I was like this bit and then I worked it all out and I spoke to Mike about it and he said, it's a tricky thing, because they can't do that, because if they break this cycle with the private prescription or whatever and they do it a different way, then they can involve social services and the kids can be taken off. So it's a really scary, horrible process for them, for everyone concerned. You said to me about the prescription cannabis and that, because someone was about the vaporizing for me, and I'd looked into it, but when I'd seen loads of studies, they'd said that it's already ground down apparently, and it's just not that good stuff. Apparently they were saying it's not nowhere near as good as what you would get, it is improving. They are starting to get actual, as it were, street cultivars. So they're basically using genetics that have come from they call it the souvenir market, but we all know what it is. And so they are improving a little bit. There's some really good pages online. Legal Cannabis Review, I think, is the one I'm thinking of on Instagram. Well worth a look for people. And they basically take and anonymize all the positive and negative feedback from people who have been prescribed these products. And what they're finding is there's a lot of inconsistency. The prices have come down. Access is improving a little, but they are tied up in bureaucracy and are limited, I think, by an ulterior motive.
We could go thick and fast. We could go like Germany. Germany's like 100,000 strong. The difference is the intention of the market here versus the intention of Germany. Germany is trying to create eventually a robust domestic marketplace. We do not want that here, because as soon as we grow and sell from this country, we then have to deal with the fact that all of these millions of people that have that consume cannabis and that access it through illegal cultivation, they shouldn't then be criminalized for it. And I think that's where we're at with this kind of conversation, is that even like, again, this weekend at Product Earth, the parents that I spoke to, the professionals that I spoke to, the CEOs, the lawyers, I had a wonderful conversation with a guy who literally just qualified as a GP, and he put his hand in the air after I did an hour-long presentation and basically went, I've just effectively learned to become a drug dealer. What can I do? I want my patients to explain to me what's going on. And I said exactly what you said there. I was like, well, if a doctor can then have a personal grievance against cannabis, a patient then comes in and says, I'm using cannabis, blah, blah. That doctor can write to the DVLA, get that person's license removed. That doctor can write to social services, get their children removed. If that doctor was so feeling inclined, they could go to a housing authority. They could go to their employer. There is all sorts of things that they could technically, they could do with that. If they've got the spite to do it within the system, they could do it outside of the system as well. And I think that's the scary.
They've got the power to do it. Yeah.
That's the point of it. Why should the doctor then have the power? The patient needs the autonomy. It needs to be, if these doctors want to hear these stories, they have to open their ears and pick up their ideas and actually go, wait a minute. I learned about all of this consensus knowledge and science. But actually, if I'm not listening to the anecdotal evidence of the people I'm prescribing to, how am I anything more than a drug pusher? And I think he recognized that in a powerful way. And we've messaged sort of back and forth since. And again, I think this is why everything, no matter from which angle it comes from, is all part of a piece of this larger puzzle that ultimately,
you're right. Yeah,
it all falls over, because there are very few actual legitimate arguments against the true ubiquitous ending of the war on drugs, let alone cannabis. And I think that being able to get children's resources like this, I think honestly, I hope in the next few years that you will be surrounded by peers that follow suit.
Yeah, of other people that are doing things like there's more, there's room for a lot more than just him. And he's just, obviously he might be leading the way a bit, but hopefully there will be a lot more different things like that coming out, It's just, it seems to be missing, doesn't it, at the minute, of all the plants and stuff. It's not, I can't really, I've done a lot of research in like plant books for kids in general. And, there just isn't any. I can't find anything. So it's, it's something that, again, it needs to be done.
Yeah.
But we can hope, can't we?
Yeah. Well, like I said, I think teaching the next generation is a way to bridge that gap. If we can't deal with those beneath us, we can raise our kids. I say our kids. I'm intending to have kids. People can raise their children to bridge that gap, to bridge that divide. And then when my peers and those beneath me die in their generation, they'll inherit what's left of the earth. And I hope that they have the knowledge, the experience, and the passion, and most of all, the curiosity and the want to create that better world. And I think that cannabis is the ultimate resource in that.
Yeah.
So it leads me to an interesting question. I actually discussed this with Danny Kushlik as well. He founded Transform and worked in drug reform for about 20 years. And I'm curious, how do you speak to your children about drugs?
Well, I've only approached the cannabis side of it. My son's 15, so we talk openly about everything, there's no, I'll talk to him about anything. But my daughter she's only 10, but obviously she can educate adults on cannabis, because obviously we speak completely. There's no stigma attached to that plant in this house. It's a praised plant. They all think, my partner, everyone just thinks it's been a miracle what it did for me. You know what I mean? And it brought the mum back. So it's not like we don't have that problem in here, but obviously a lot of people do.
Yeah.
But it's. For me, I just don't think you can put cannabis in with all of the other drugs. I can't, it doesn't sit with me like that. I just feel like it's its own thing, and I don't know, you look at cocaine and all of this sort of stuff, and how can you say that cannabis is the same as that, in a league like that? Cocaine can't cure all these things, and it's just, can it? Are you going to tell me it can now?
I'm not. All I would do is highlight that again, cocaine is an end result of a prohibitive system. Whereas coca leaves, for example, culturally massively important in South America because it offsets altitude sickness.
Yeah.
It's culturally consumed for many of the sort of medicinal benefits and qualities anyway. And so it's kind of and I'm not advocating here for, let's legalize medical cocaine. I'm not kind of going down that route, although there is actually interesting tidbit, folks. So we are, I don't know if we're currently, but in 2016, we were the world's leading importer and exporter of medical cocaine.
Medical cocaine.
Yes, medical cocaine. Yeah, exactly. There's an interesting thing I probably should put together at some point to release the information I've got on that. But yeah, I think it was the Sun of all people highlighted the discrepancy between the volume of cocaine that was imported versus the volume of cocaine that was exported. And then nobody questioned that there were several tons missing. Everyone just went, don't need to know. Not tons, sorry, kilograms are missing, and nobody needed to know. It's a very interesting system that we live under, because the vast majority of the prohibited drugs have benefits. It's the stigmas and the negative images that have arisen from the small minority of people that consume these as being weaponized by society. Well, yeah, exactly that. And because of then the society we create, if we then have a society that celebrates binge drinking and binge consumption of a substance, then when you marry it, and the other issue, I suppose, is actually when you mix cocaine with alcohol, you get a substance called cocoethanol, which in the body, which is a huge euphoriant. So basically, what people are almost seeking is confidence, antidepressant effects. So if we can pathologize it that way, rather than looking at it as the negative potential consequences of the substances, then it does fall into the same sort of remit. But I understand how it's a much harder conversation, because again, like the
environmental benefits, the seizures, the fact that it's reduced. I don't think you can say that any other thing is doing what this plant is doing, is what I sort of mean by that, you know?
Well, yeah, because I suppose the wonderful thing is because cannabis obviously is phytocannabinoids, they mimic endogenous cannabinoids. But obviously we have known, and we're living under the consequences of opioids. We know we have opioid receptors in the body. That isn't to say we should celebrate that in the same sort of way. But again, I wouldn't then advocate for the prohibition of opium. In my vision, everything is lawful and accessible in some form or way, but some things are cheaper and far more readily accessible, such as psilocybin, cannabis, etc., rather than then your more higher end things would be regulated and controlled, not through just a pricing restriction, because then you just create a class thing, but it would be through some form of, I don't know, I guess not monitoring, but a regulated system that allows people to self-report without stigma, dependency issues. And I think that with cannabis, we don't really see it, because the 9 to 10% that globally have these sort of dependency issues with cannabis fall into sort of one of two groups. They're either actively have a problem but have access, therefore they never really notice they have a problem, or they have access then don't, and then have access then don't, and then they end up with kind of detrimental consequences to their mental health and to their life because of the lack of access more than it is
consistency.
And so this is what we're seeing, is that actually a world with no drugs is worse than a world with too many drugs. It's far better, almost in my opinion, that we deal with the issues why people choose escapism. So in the ideal world, if everyone's well adjusted and happy, everyone's got enough money to live on if we choose to continue under a monetary system, and everyone has access to food and to meaningful work in the world. And by that, I don't just mean labor. I mean actually something that they can give their all to and grow and develop and nurture in the world. Then we could have opium everywhere. We could have cocaine everywhere, and few would touch it. And we look at
we're happy with the life.
There's the Bruce K. Alexander experiment with Rat Park, and that basically showed that substances in and of themselves are not intrinsically addictive or dependency causing. It's environmental issues that will cause you to much more likely consume a substance. And I think that's evident in the fact of, again, binge culture in this country is predominantly a impoverished activity. You know what I mean? Because people are drinking to escape the weekend, the drudgery of working 5 days to survive. It's the whole
culture change, isn't it, needed? I don't know how we do that, though.
This one beautiful plant, I think, because again, it works as an intoxicant for a lot of people. It gives them that escapism. It gives them that spiritual or emotional pain relief, as it were. It gives them the opportunity to kind of go, oh, my job and oh, this and oh, that, and just go, okay, I can deal with it. And I think that anything we can do to allow people to de-stress and give them an opportunity to think critically of their life is a good thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And like suicide around where we are is obviously perhaps in the fire brigade. It's rife at the minute around here. It's just so sad. It's just awful, But like you said, there needs to be so many different things in place now, and it's like they've not changed anything for so long, and it needs changing, doesn't it? And I mean, do you have high hopes for this? I'm interested in what you think. Where do you think we're going to go with it?
Yeah, I mean, every time I public speak, I always say to people that I'm a diehard optimist, even though I come across as quite a cold-hearted pessimist. But I've given 6 years of my life thus far to this, and I'm happy to give the next 60, because the truth is the truth, and it doesn't need to ever really take hold in my lifetime for me to want to protect it. If all I'm doing is protecting the embers at this point, someday somebody will blow it into a fire. You know what I mean? And I feel that's all I'm doing is acting as an interim between those that have come before me, sacrificed their lives, sacrificed their freedom, their time, their family, sanity, to protect this knowledge and to in some way push it into the next generation. But I do believe that the faster the oppressive systems are coming down on us, the harder that boot presses, I think the more likely it makes a form of revolution that doesn't necessarily need to be violent. I think we're already seeing the embers of this start to really take flame, as it were, in what you're seeing with even things like Extinction Rebellion and whatever. I know there's a lot of fractured arguments being made at the minute, but they're all the same conversation ultimately. And that's that if we don't stop right now, address neoliberalistic capitalism and this idea of endless growth, we are going to destroy ourselves. And with what I've seen and heard and had in conversations with people with future technologies that some people are deriving from cannabis in terms of true carbon sequestration technology, actually creating warehouses where cannabis is grown, millions of plants are grown in each cycle to sequester carbon to create renewable energy within the systems. Those kind of projects are going to take hold. And I think that all it's taking at the minute is we're almost changing slow because that's the image they portray. Behind the scenes, everything's changing. So petroleum companies are now becoming energy companies. I mean, even with things like Brexit, I think in some small way, Britain might be ahead of the curve in trying to, not intentionally at all. I think this was a great act of, what is it called? Harry Carey, sort of ritualistic suicide economically for us. But I think that when globalization collapses and the global markets are potentially going to, as we move into a potential crypto world, decentralized world, ultimately, we could be in quite a good position. And ultimately, we have got space. We have got the willingness. I mean, look at the North, look at Wales. These are generations of unemployed people that have a serious work ethic, a passion and a pride for their communities and want to rebuild what has been sort of taken from them. So give them half an opportunity in an industry. And I think that this country will build itself up to a position that everything will change. Everything will change. Once you give people enough food to actually increase to increase their IQ. Even we know that IQs are affected by poverty, etc., and the lack of nutrition stunts emotional and physical growth and everything else. So once people have enough of that, their ideas change.
Like nutrition, though. Again, we're back to nutrition. You need the nutrition. So people need nutrition. It's fuel for your brain. I say that to the kids and that we know all the time. It's fuel for your head and everything. It's not just food. It's like, you need all these nutrients and things like that. And I think we're living in a world of fast food, aren't we now? And it's just
again, I feel like even that you look at the big chains that are now trying to change how that works. These are not cows grown and killed it from Brazil, flown into the country. You know what I mean? Even if they are still consuming meat or dairy or whatever, they're trying local. They're trying to address carbon. I mean, the Co-op has just announced that they're going to halve the price of all of its vegan food as a way to cut its carbon footprint. So the more people that buy of that than other products, it reduces the amount of their total carbon footprint, which when the carbon tax comes in, will really detrimentally affect them. So I think in some ways, capitalism's desperate attempt to evolve is going to usher in an age of ubiquitous cannabis usage in industry. Right. I think that's just kind of inevitable. So yeah, I think that is kind of inevitable. Whether we'll have the right to grow it and just use it how we choose as sentient individuals, that's going to require a lot of work and a lot of effort, I think. But industry are already moving on this. You look at the patents that are coming out of China. We look at, like I say, these projects that are coming out of energy production are serious, like serious. And if they can then really actually pull a finger out and look a little bit wider and go, wait a minute, if we make the building out of cannabis, we can grow it on the site, clean up the soils in the air. And then it's basically these warehouses where they pump in CO2 from the atmosphere to grow the plants. The plants are then mulched into a biomass, which then feeds an incinerator, which then pumps the CO2 back into the plants. And it's an insulated system. It's. I
think you should be somewhere else than sat there, don't you? With all of that in your head.
Again, like I'm a nerd with this because I genuinely remember one of the only memories that I really have of quite young as a kid was asking me mom, what needs solving in the world? Like literally, like what needs solving in the world? She said energy. She said energy is going to be the big thing. And kind of all my life that was niggling away at the back of my brain. And I've always been curious. I've always watched sci-fi sort of things. I've always watched any documentary about new technologies or whatever, because it's just niggled away. And then when I sort of had that revelatory experience and realized the true potential of cannabis, it was like, woof. So now, yeah, every time I come near anything like that, I'm just, wow, I need to know this. I need to learn this. What I want to look at this. And again, the potential of it is we're on day one. We really are. We have I believe we have a Star Trek future in this. It is the ultimate renewable resource. And yeah, once we can get the political will and get the people to not even to almost know enough, but to just stop damaging the name of cannabis because, oh, well, my daughter's boyfriend's niece had a bad time once at a festival. You know, those kind of third-hand anecdotes, and they just continue to proliferate this crap, and they'll deny you sometimes decades worth of data, research, and information. And they go, no, I've got an anecdote from 15 years ago that tells me this is bad, so I don't need to listen to you. And the more of those people we can reach, they're the ones that vote. They're the ones that actually, you know, write the letters to the TV shows and whatever else, that engage with that mainstream. We can either choose to build this alternative model and ignore these tens of millions of people that are stuck, enslaved within the system, or we can infiltrate from every facet of it, and we can seek to turn people's minds from being lost in this to being, again, curious, to being excited by the future, because we're human, we're sentient, we're magic monkeys on a flying rock through space. And as far as we know, there are no other magic monkeys out there. So why the hell are we lost in all of this shit, depressed in our lives, when every moment is a reason to celebrate? And I say that as someone who has suffered with depression and mental health issues the entirety of my life, and will the rest of it. But it's still within that realization that, and again, it's tied all back to it. The seeds that you plant through this book, I think will lead to, I hope, a more compassionate, empathetic, and more well-rounded youth. I really do.
We can hope for the best, and it seems to be doing. It seems to be doing that, you know, from what I can, the feedback I'm getting. So that's really good. It's just been nice, you know. And then I suppose even when little Murray read it, Karen's son, she said, you know, it's just so nice because like it just makes them feel totally normal, you know, that they're not breaking the law, and that if there's a kid's book about it, it must be just, you know, it's a normal thing for them. So it's just been really nice to make something that's been a little passion of mine. You know, you don't make any money from things like this as such, but it's a really nice little project for me to just give something back to the plant and the people that like to consume it, and that it saves them, you know, helps them. Yeah. It's so yeah.
Excellent. Well, if anybody does want to help Alison make a little bit of money out of this, you can find a link below to the book via the website, walterandthemagicseed.co.uk. So yeah, we'll include.
.com, I think it is .com. Is it .com? I think it's .com.
Slightly check my notes.
.com, yeah.
It's .com, yeah. It's .com, folks. You'll find it in the bio below. I suppose there's only one more question to ask, which is the final question that I ask all of my guests. And I suppose we kind of touched a little bit on it, the answer, but I suppose you can give us a little bit more info. And that is, what does the future hold for you?
Well, who knows what the future holds for any of us? I mean, really moving forward, like I said, I'm hoping to get the book probably another 10 pages added at least, with more environmental things that, that can be changed with it, and to get it into a hardback. I've spoke to the people. It's going to be like with a nice purple ribbon in it and just a big, solid, nice book. So I'm going to do that. I'm thinking about doing the flashcards. Obviously, I'm already on with the second book. That's just in the middle of being illustrated. And then obviously I've got my business and I homeschool my daughter. So I'm pretty busy just on with all of that, really. And just trying to stay sane in today's world. That's about it. Simple.
That is a full-time job in and of itself these days.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. I love that. I love that. So who knows with the future? I've had some cracking answers to that question. Because again, it's just it's an ambiguous question, but I think it's a nice way to kind of to round it off, because it gives people an idea of sort of what you'll be doing sort of in the not too distant future, and hopefully we'll have you back on here again once you've got another book out.
Yeah,
excellent.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Well, like I said,
folks, thanks for having me on.
Anytime. It's been a pleasure. It's really been a pleasure. I'll just do a little bit of housekeeping right now. So folks, like I said, if you want to check out Walter and the magicseed.com, you can find out more information and get a hold of your own copy. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please do check us out on patreon.com/Simpa Life and help me keep this little project going, especially in these dark coming weeks without Macca. It's lonely without him to bounce off with this. You know me, guys. I like to talk, but I do miss him just chiming in and just swearing randomly. So send some love to Macca, folks. You know where he is. He's out there. He's out in the universe right now. But anyway, check us out on all social media platforms at Simpa Life. And subscribe, like, share, or do whatever you do on whatever platform you are on. Peace and love, folks.